I hand over to Sam, who's going to moderate this discussion.
Thank you. Well, I'm very excited to be up here with the firepower of the industry. So this is a real privilege for us at the at SRX to pick the brains and to understand the views of the CEOs for this upcoming year. And the way we're going to do this is we're going to show some graphs up on the screen, and we're going to ask for their reaction. So this is live and unscripted. So this is just a little plug. I think I'm better. Testing. Okay. This is just a little plug. All the data that we're going to show up here can be generated in a few seconds through this console that these gentlemen and their companies have access to. And so the first screen we have up here is the average PSF. This is all SRX data for private sales market. And you can see that prior to the financial crisis, we had a build-up in price. Then during the financial crisis, you can see the dip there, that prices came down. And since then, they've been steadily increasing, although we're beginning to see a little bit of a taper if you look at the most final results, which is as of today, or yesterday, actually, when we generated out this report. So, Ismail, can you tell us a little bit about what you see in this graph and what's caused the build prior to the financial crisis, and what's then caused the quick rebound? And
Fine. I mean, here the graph shows since January 2006. But if you just go a little bit more back, but though it's not in the graph, since 2003, after SARS, the property prices were in doldrums. For a very long period of time, there wasn't much of an excitement. Even when the earlier speakers showed a 15-year return, we must understand there were many cycles. Property may not, if you look at it in a very long term, the many cycles, there are cycles that will bring your price so much down that the overall return was negligible, less than 5%. But if I confine to this particular slide, prior to the Lehman crisis, generally the global economy fundamental was right. The GDP growth was strong. Economy was performing well. A lot more immigrants. Wages were relatively on the upward trend. And that has caused a greater excitement. And prior to the collapse, what we also witness here is a lot more funds from global funds. We are talking about from the Middle East, from Europe and America, investing in properties and taking up stacks of new launches. And the market was at its very positive sentiment. And that created the demand, and prices start to move in a very positive way. Then came the Lehman crisis. And there was a very sharp drop simply because the market confidence was overtaken overnight. People were so worried about where the bottom was when the US crisis, when some of the big names started to collapse. And people felt that, hey, and a lot of people were trying to dump. You know, actually, if you look at the Singapore property market, there were many things. It's maybe, I'm not so sure that I would be able to illustrate every point, for the fact that some were contributed by deferred payment schemes and easy credit. And all these things fuel the demand for properties, and people realize, Singapore being land scarce, there is a lot of money to be made from speculating short term. And that's what people were flipping. Flipping was a norm. People wrote books how to flip properties. Yep. But today, how can we do that? So when all these things created up to the peak, when 2009, when it hit hard, and you know generally Singapore property, unlike even across the neighbor, less than 5% of the properties foreigners buy. In Singapore, a large percentage of especially the core areas are invested by foreigners. But when the crisis happened, a lot of foreigners decided to pull the money because they were very worried, where is the bottom? For example, the sale prior to the Lehman crisis, it was at the rate of per square foot, depending on which stack and so on, 2,000, 2,300, 2,500. But during the Lehman crisis at its bottom, the sale was at $1,300 per square foot. That means it has eroded 40% in less than 3 months. But then why was that a sharp recovery? Because people straight away start to realize the American problem was a problem, but there was also a bottom to it. And the American problem didn't affect the entire world so much, though we are in a way linked, but it was more confined to an American issue of overspending and all other things. And then there were emerging economy in the last 3 years. The Asia, the India, the China. And that's why Singapore was sheltered, and there was such a speedy recovery after 09, 010, 011. It is really the money of the Asia's growth. And we look at the investors coming in big time, be it from China and India, and as well as the low interest rate, and as well as Singaporeans' confidence. And you know, Singaporeans, by and large, as long as can make money, we don't need to understand macro and micro. Where do we understand through this? I mean, why do I say that here? But there are dangers to it. I mean, I do very much recognize this. I think if we have some kind of presentation, is it a fair price to pay 1,002 and 1,003 for the Hillers and the Watertown to do an analysis? That would be very exciting to know. Because at the end of the day, we sold in hundreds, people queue. Yeah, what fundamentals do they understood? I'm really not so sure. But the bottom line here is this, that the recovery was purely driven. And that's where we have recovered. And if you look at it in the last segment, the last quarter, yes, there are indications. Again, it's sentiment. Maybe if I may just go a little bit beyond this slide. I also want to say, the landscape, the stage has changed. When I say the stage for property investment in Singapore has changed, and I say it has changed in the last 1 year. My opinion. Whatever I said, let me come out with a caveat. Please, this is only my personal opinion, not my company or not my research department or whatever it is. So I just want to do the caveat. But if from an analogical, logical point of view, you can make your decision. I think the stage has changed in the last 1 year. Why do I say that? Ever since the post-election, the new normal, the way we think, the way we do things has changed. And I will give you a few illustrations. What is the main thing the election has impacted here is the people's resentment over fast price increment, affordability. And how has the reaction taken place when the stage has changed? Demand and supply today has changed. What do I mean by that? Never in the history did we had a supply of 28,000 BTO flat last year, 25,000 scheduled this year. Never in the history, in the last 15 years since executive condo was built, we only had 50,000 houses in the last almost 15 years, but this year alone slated 5,000 executive condo, and continual supply of GLS, government land sales. What is all going towards a direction which is supply. Supply and supply. Be it HDB, be it EC, be it mass market. With the sole objective of price moderation. Therefore, if you look at this sentiment, coupled with some of the cooling measures, if you look at it, I'm not saying that now we are saying foreigners are not welcome. But the foreigners must have a lot of courage to come.
Okay.
Yeah. So either he must have analyzed the macro and the micro, and he still see excitement. But it is. But that's why the speakers have said, in a long-term perspective, it may make sense. But in a short term, it is very, very challenging. It makes almost no sense for anybody to pay 10% ABSD and sell within 2 years with a 12% seller stamp duty. And the property market, how upbeat can you be for it to go up beyond that, other than your holding cost? So actually, if you look at it, today's concept, when I say the stage has changed, is Singaporean first, in a way. And will this be positive? And I do see there are a lot of silver lining in this. There will be opportunities, but I will just stop here because for this question, please.
Okay, so we're going to get to supply. We're going to get to supply in a few minutes.